8. She's the first thing I think of when I wake up, and she's the first thing I see. She smiles at me from the photograph on the bedside table, illuminated by the dim, synthetic glow of the clock face. She wears a white dress. I switch on the light and get out of bed. I have to do it right away. Otherwise, I'll just lie here thinking bad thoughts. And on a planet where night lasts for days, you can't wait for the sun to come up. I have a hangover. Bought a bottle on the way home and drank the whole thing after I got back here last night. I was supposed to be quitting, but the stuff at Harlan's was too good. It's always too good and never good enough. And all over again, I can't get enough of what I don't want. Since moving into this 2-room hovel nearly a decade ago, I've hardly changed a thing. Same flesh-colored walls, same uniform carpeting, no decorations. The few additions I have added are a weightlifting bench and a comprehensive electronic work desk. I go to the fridge in the corner and retrieve my breakfast, raw eggs and stimulant pills washed down with a couple glasses of water. Then onto the weightlifting bench. Not one of those fancy anti-grav, ultra-grav, variable resistance models. No, I prefer the old-fashioned kind, with the big, damn heavy weights. Made of metal, tech bothers me sometimes, and besides, there's something savagely divine about the act of man moving steel. The jingle of metal weights kissing one another to each repetition is music to my ears. My chest burns with sweet agony as blood pumps into the muscles. The white noise chorus of rainfall against my solitary window intensifies. I recall the words of Rutherford Harland, how he hates the rain. Most people do. I don't mind it. The only thing better is thunder. An hour later, thunder shows up. It rolls like the strike of a gong. Sweat coats my ugly, hairless head. I put up the last rep of my last set and place the bar on the rack. For a moment, I sit on the bench, listening to the storm, breathing deeply, feeling my body pulse with every heartbeat. No man of my age should have to work so hard. But this is the life I have chosen, devoted to a cause. When the day comes for me to fulfill my destiny, maybe I'll fail, but it won't be because I'm too weak, too slow, or too out of breath. All this will be worth it. All the lonely nights, all the bad thoughts, all the hard work. All good and damn worth it. An image flashes across my mind's eye. Maria's body, the way I found it. The knife. I lie back down on the bench, grab the bar with my big hands and push it off the rack. I can do more. I can go harder. 15 minutes later, sweat is running into my eyes. The vein in my forehead pulses with blood flow. My breath hisses through clenched teeth at the apex of every press. It feels like I'm killing myself. With a last grunt of effort, I put up the final rep, and I lie there, panting like a dog. My shirt is stretched tight. I can see the bulge of veins through the fabric. After my heartbeat slows back down to resting rate, I return to the kitchen to down a heavy-duty, genetics-based muscle growth supplement. It rushes through my bloodstream, fueling my cells like coal to a hungry furnace. I grab my data pad from the bedside table and dial Harlan's number. "Hello?" says a posh voice. "That you, Hennessy?" I say, mopping my head with a towel.
"It is."
"Jack Tarelli here. I know it's early, but I was hoping to have a word with your boss."
"Mr. Harland is in his study and has asked not to be disturbed. May I relay a message?"
"It's a bit private. Just let him know I called, will you?"
"I believe Mrs. Reed would like to speak with you, sir."
"Mrs. Reed? I don't want to talk to her." A pause.
"She insists, sir."
"I bet she does."
"Here she is, sir."
I start to protest, but it's too late.
"Mr. Tarelli,"
says Yvonne Reed.
"What a pleasant surprise."
"You ever leave the house, Mrs. Reed?"
Is that why you called?
Maybe. Now be a good girl and run and fetch Daddy, won't you?
My father is a very busy man. I'm afraid you don't understand how lucky you were to meet with him once. If you think he's going to drop everything for drinks whenever you have the inclination, you're in for a disappointment. His time is precious.
You, on the other hand, seem to have more of it than you know what to do with.
He is grieving over the loss of his son,
says Yvonne.
And your visit seemed to upset him even more. I don't know what you said to put him in such a state, but frankly, I wouldn't mind if you just left him alone and never called again.
Does Daddy Dearest know you screen his calls like this?
Only when I think such disturbances might affect his health.
Oh, that's all right, Evie. You seem disturbed enough for the both of you. I wonder, just why does it bother you so much not knowing what your father and I talked about last night? You think if you keep me on the phone talking nonsense long enough, I'll let something slip? A short pause.
I don't presume to understand all of my father's business, she says. I only care about his well-being. If this interruption is essential, I can transfer you to his office.
Thank you, I say. She hangs up. When I call back, to my surprise, Harland answers personally. Hello, Jack, he says. Mr. Harland, I apologize for calling you up like this. But before I get any deeper into all this, I was wondering if you might clear something up for me.
Oh, I will if I can.
Do you have any idea what your son was doing in that abandoned factory? Harlan goes quiet. I wait patiently, like a good fisherman does. I want to know, without so many words, whether or not Rutherford is aware of those property purchases, the disappearing act of the title transfers, and or his son's possible involvement in the patch of real estate where he was found dead. After a few moments of dead air, Harlan makes a thoughtful sort of noise in his throat.
Pardon me, he says. Sometimes it's hard just to think. I feel like my mind has gone dull, like an old blade. It's like a disability. The sharp, old luster is gone forever, and I know it. You ask me what he was doing there. It implies that you believe he was there of his own volition.
Just covering my bases, keeping an open mind. Otherwise, you run the risk of seeing mirages in the desert, so to speak.
A true professional. I'm afraid nothing comes to mind. If I'd suspected Nathan was doing anything that would put him in danger, I'd have kept a sharper eye. What a strange and terrible thing to talk about him in the past tense like this. It isn't right. The blessing of living to old age is also its greatest curse, defying the natural order of things.
Harlan clears his throat. I can't tell if he's grumbling in frustration or holding back tears, or both.
Check your bank account, Jack. Your fee has been deposited.
Pardon me, sir, but you already paid me yesterday, remember?
I remember, Harlan snaps. And now I am paying you again.
I quickly scan through my data pad, accessing my account, and my jaw drops. This must be a mistake, Mr. Harland. It's double what we agreed on.
It is, but it's no mistake.
I see. Pay double what's expected, expect double the results. Something like that? Harlan makes a funny, humming sort of noise.
Such a relief to work with someone of intelligence for a change.
I'll let you go, Mr. Harland.
All the best to you, Jack. Keep your wits about you.
Same. 9. The undying night can play tricks on your mind, but the traffic in the skies is a clear indication of midday as my cab flies over the industrial zones that ring the outskirts of Amber City like cancerous growths. The cab drops me off in the dirty little neighborhood known simply as Port Town, a non-commercial spaceport district home to various methods of interplanetary travel, legitimate and otherwise. Not my favorite place to visit. On the bright side, it stopped raining for the moment. I pay the driver and step out into the street, right into a large puddle. The water goes over my ankle, down into my shoe. I swear and hop on one foot as the cab takes off. People are everywhere. Assorted breeds of rogues and miscreants. It's an old understanding that the Amber PD leave Port Town alone. Despite its unsavory nature, this district brings in a lot of money. The legality of such matters is a technicality to which the city is willing to turn a blind eye for the sake of the almighty credit. The only law here is bouncers and hired muscle. The streets are lined with bars, taverns, and rat holes advertising pleasures for sale. I shoulder past men and women of all sizes, shapes, and colors, wearing a patchwork of clothing and armor from across the star system. I see axe-slug pistols holstered at hips, particle rifles strapped to backs, and wicked blades sheathed on forearms and ankles. A broad-shouldered, unnaturally muscular fellow wearing an all-black breather mask with 2 X's scratched into the eyes of the visor goes out of his way to elbow me as we pass. I bounce off him. My blood boils, but I keep on walking. It's been a long time, but the neon sign is still there, partially blown out and flickering. Good Caesar's Garage. For a moment I stand there thinking of days gone by. Days when that sign wasn't blown out or flickering. Back when I came here not as a Seamus, but as an Amber City detective. On a weekly basis, my partner and I would visit Good Caesar, the owner and operator of this establishment, and a snitch for the Blue Wreath mob. He'd feed us info, and we'd pretend not to notice the illicit activities going on in his chop shop. But that was over a decade ago. Back when there was still the occasional police presence in Port Town, back before Blue Wreath won. I can hear the bug-zabber buzzing of the neon sign above me as I step through the doorway. A sensor catches my movement, and a 2-note salute echoes through the building, announcing my arrival. The place looks more like a cave than a garage, and the skeletal remains of hover cars, small airships, half-disassembled bots, and other unfortunate machinery lying dejectedly throughout. The roof drips from the seam from a set of bay doors. The big man at the counter barely looks at me as I approach. "Need to speak with Caesar," I say. "Ain't here," says the big man. "Need me to say it again?" I say, louder this time. That gets his attention. The big man sneers. He wears a mechanic's jumpsuit with an out-of-place, skinny necktie. He outweighs me by a good 75 pounds, but it's mostly fat. He's got a face like a bulldog. One of his eyes wanders. "Ain't here," he says again. "Get your ugly mug out of here before you regret it." People lose teeth over words like ugly. Look. I lean forward and place my palms on the counter. I'm not some goon here to work him over. No more than you're a mechanic. I just need to talk with him a minute. Don't make me get physical. I'm an old man. You're apt to make me pull a muscle. The big man leans forward too, mimicking my move, but with one small adjustment. He puts one hand under the counter where there's certainly a weapon. A sawed-off shotgun if I were him. "What makes you think I'm not a mechanic?" he demands. He's only just finished the question when I grab his necktie and drop all my weight to the floor. His face slamming against the countertop sounds like a bowling ball bouncing off a sidewalk slab. Before he can react, I stand, wrap my arm around his head, and pull him the rest of the way over the counter, where he can't reach that weapon, and hold him suspended there. "Mechanics don't wear neckties," I growl into his cauliflower ear. "Bound to get them caught in something and get churned up real nasty." A stream of words in a foreign language erupts from the far end of the room. I turn to see a skinny little man standing near the rear doorway of the garage. He's dressed in a similar jumpsuit stained with grease. Thin, scruffy fuzz sprouts from his unshaven face, and his eyes stare at me with fright. "Hey, Caesar," I say, still holding the struggling thug as blood dribbles from his nose. "You caught me in the middle of teaching some manners to your doorman." Caesar turns on his heels, flings open the door, and takes off into the darkness. Damned if you don't need a lesson, too. I pull my hostage head first over the counter and toss him to the floor. Before he can recover, I roll over the countertop. I dash through the back door just in time to see good Caesar turn and race down a back alley. I clench my hands into fists and pump my arms as I make chase. I turn the corner and barely manage to avoid a pair of trash cans toppled to slow me down. Picking my way around them, I knocked a gawking bystander to the ground and keep running. I can see Caesar up ahead. He turns around, aiming something at me. I throw myself to the ground, realizing a moment too late that it isn't a gun. He's fooled me. He throws the empty beer bottle at me, and it shatters a couple feet in front of me. When I look up, he's gone. "Caesar!" I yell, getting to my feet. I jog to where I last saw him. The rusty metallic frame of a fire escape ladder is still trembling against its counterweight. I look up at the roof, growl a curse, and grab the rung of the ladder to begin my ascent, but a tiny rattling noise from behind gives me pause. I look over my shoulder and see the boxy frame of a metal dumpster in the shadows. Panting from my run, I take a deep breath, stomp over to the dumpster, and throw open the lid. Caesar is huddled inside. At his exposure, he tries to hide by pulling a garbage bag over himself. I reach in and grab a fistful of his shirt. "Up you go," I say. I haul him out and place him on his feet in the alley. No sooner has his shoes touched the pavement than he tries running again, only to be yanked back like a dog on a chain. I hold him by the shoulders in front of me, trying to lend him a bit of the dignity he can't seem to find himself.
"Don't kill me, Mr. Tarelli,"
he sputters in thickly accented speech. "Kill you?" I say, genuinely surprised. He looks up at me, sniveling. "I came here to talk to you, not to kill you." He doesn't look convinced. So I show him I mean it. I let go of his shirt and stand with my palms open. A yellow smile with a few missing teeth breaks across his face. He all but falls apart with relief.
"Oh, Jack Tarelli,"
he says, slapping me on the arm.
"I see you breaking the nose of my associate, and gives me quite a scare. Today I do not want to be crushed into pieces."
"Well, it's early yet. Why'd you think I was here to kill you?" Caesar waves it off.
"I have policy. Too many people trying to kill me these days, and too hard to remember which ones. I decide run. Then think, I am still alive, so it has worked so far. Let us talk in shop."
Caesar gestures for me to follow him, swatting clinging garbage from his hair and jumpsuit without pretense. The big doorman is waiting for us. Blood wreathes his nose, lips, and jaw. In his hands, as I suspected, is a sawed-off axe-slug shotgun. Before he can use it, Caesar rattles off some speech in his primary language. The thug shoots me a wall-eyed glare, then unhappily tucks the weapon back under the counter. As we walk by, I take the handkerchief from my breast pocket and toss it to the thug. "Your nose is running." He growls. The handkerchief falls to the floor. 10.
"You almost gave me a heart attack, Jack. Never thought I'd see you again."
Sitting at a small table in the back room of good Caesar's garage, I've positioned my chair facing the door. Not that I think a saint like Caesar would try anything funny, but you can't be too careful in Port Town.
"When you stopped coming around my shop, stopped asking questions, I think I'm about to be shut down. But then I heard of your arrest."
Caesar's face stretches out into a stinking smile.
"You were in prison all this time?"
"I never went to prison," I respond flatly. "The charges were dropped."
"You know what the news called you? Jack the Knife, the six-shooter."
I hardly even realize I'm doing it. One moment, I'm sitting there trying to keep my cool. The next, the table we're sitting at is in two. It falls in splintered pieces to the floor, sending up a cloud of dust. My fist hovers in midair where I smash through it. Caesar sits on the ground, having tilted his chair backward in terror, and tumbled to the floor. One of his hands is raised in feeble defense, shaking. It's a chore to open my fist. I stretch out my fingers. Flimsy table. I don't like that name, I say. Caesar's throat bobs from a hard swallow, and he nods once. Look, I sigh. I'm here on a case.
A case? An investigation, you mean?
Caesar gives the halves of the table a nervous look, then tentatively rises to his feet. He rights his chair and sits back down.
You are still police.
Private eye. The grin on Caesar's face is now smug and knowing. It doesn't take a genius to know what he's thinking. How the mighty have fallen. I try to ignore it. So, how about it, I say. For old time's sake, we do a little business.
What could I have that you want?
Information on the blue wreath. Caesar's grin dies.
Your investigation involves the mob?
That's what I'm trying to figure out.
No,
He says.
I cannot help with that.
You can. It's whether or not you will.
I don't talk to anyone about that anymore. Blue Wreath is too big, too powerful, too dangerous to leak information.
I know better than most what he means about the danger. It wasn't exactly safe back when I was a cop either, but it was never this bad. Prior to the war on Antioch, there had been several major crime syndicates on Jannix, each with claims to delineated territories. In big cities like Amber, it was particularly bad but manageable. But then, when Jannix's best and brightest went off to fight the war, one of those syndicates got ambitious. Started annexing neighboring territories, branching out into all kinds of new activities. The Blue Wreath Boys, named for the Blue Wreath Nebula, visible in the southern sky of Pyro once every 10 years, became so large and powerful that they absorbed almost all competitors, becoming a worldwide force of organized crime on Jannix. Nowadays, their influence extends all the way across the star system, including Pyro. The word mob has practically become synonymous with the Blue Wreath. By the time I traded in my army uniform for a badge, the Blue Wreath was the #1 enemy of Jannix law enforcement. Amber City was the hometown, and for some cops like me, mob activity was the highest priority. My partner and I specialized in homicide cases with suspected links to the Blue Wreath, and there were plenty of them. At that time, good Caesar was running his chop shop with mob backing, and for a little grease money, he passed along information to us. Information that helped track down quite a few killers. But that was almost 15 years ago. A lot has changed. For everyone. Nowadays, the Blue Wreath owns Amber City. That's not a matter of debate. It's theirs. They've got a stake in almost every facet of business and industry. A shaky, unspoken truce now exists between the police and the mob. Every so often, one side will send a message just to show they still mean business, but justice isn't being done in this city anymore. Crime runs rampant and unchecked. Some say it's a necessary evil. I say it's rotten. Not surprising that Harlan wanted to find somebody outside the police department to investigate his son's murder. It's funny to be sitting with Caesar like this, so many years later. Like two old war vets swapping stories about the bad old days. The days before Jack the Knife. Royal evening, I say.
What?
Says Caesar. Royal evening. Does the name mean anything to you? Caesar shrugs. What about the name Nathan Harland? Caesar's eyes bulge a bit. He lowers his voice to a whisper.
Is that why you've come here? You think I know what happened to him? And you think Blue Wreath was involved?
Nice of you to ask all the questions for me.
I don't know anything.
Sounds like you know he was murdered. And you must know what a thorn Rutherford Harlan has been in Blue Wreath's side. He's never caved to the mob, and he's proud of it. Killing his only son would send a pretty clear message to the old man, don't you think?
I'm telling you, Jack, I don't know.
I absolutely believe you, I say, standing up. And I'm not here to try to beat anything out of you. That's not how I conduct business. But I do know how, if the mood strikes. I reach into my pocket, causing Caesar to flinch, and pull out a wad of cash. I peel off a few 100-credit bills and hold them out to him. Consider it a down payment, I say as his grease-stained hand nervously accepts the bills. Then I fish around my jacket pocket and come out with a half-credit coin. I flip it in his direction, and he catches it against his chest.
What's this for?
He says. I gesture to the pieces of the table on the floor. Piece of junk couldn't have been worth more than that. Keep in touch, Caesar. Double-cross me, and I'll be back. That's when you better run. I don't wait for an answer. I leave the back room and see my own way out, keeping a close eye on Caesar's thug. He shoots me another glare, but nothing more. I notice he's taken off his tie. 11.
Jack the Knife. That's what the media started calling him. The six-shooter killer. As unforgiving, deadly, and cold as a blade. And how cold? How cold a man would have to be to do something like this to a fellow human being. How cold to do it to his own wife.
It's 12 years in the past, and the district attorney's voice has the measured and practiced tone of a stage actor. He turns from the jury. He presses a button. A picture appears on screen. The air in the courtroom grows thinner, sucked down by a collective inhale of shock and disgust. Another push of the button, and the image is replaced by a new one. Disgust turns into despair. The DA keeps quiet, letting the pictures do the talking. I try not to look. Even after seeing those pictures 100 times, having hard copy prints waved in my face, seeing black-boxed, edited versions flash across the news, and seeing the real-life, unedited version plastered to the back of my eyeballs, there to meet me with every blink. Even after all that, it hurts. Hurts just as much as the very first time I saw her lying there. Sitting at a table in front of the courtroom, I turn away because I know which picture comes next. The jury does too. They've seen them all a dozen times or more throughout the course of this trial. But familiarity does nothing to soften the blow for them either. In a way, it only makes things worse. Knowing what's coming has them curling their lips in anticipation, flinching preemptively, like a dog about to get smacked. There's fear and regret in their eyes, but there is something else, a morbid fascination. Why? Because there is something truly irredeemable, justifiably despised. And over the course of 2.5 months, about 9 Jannix nights, the prosecution has been chipping away at a barrier, blurring the line between the crime and the defendant, shifting the hatred for the act and redirecting it onto the individual, placing Jack Tarelli in the line of fire. The scary part is, it's working. The DA flips to the last picture. Somewhere in the courtroom, a woman cries out. Grown men turn their heads. I hold no animosity toward the people of the jury. They can only react to what they are shown. It's the prosecution who's to blame. It's not enough that I lost my wife. It's not enough that my life has been ruined. They just keep pouring salt into the wound. They just keep twisting the knife.
I'd like to return for a moment to the issue of the weapon,
says the DA. Of course he would. The lack of evidence against me has his team rehashing the same old stuff.
No weapon was recovered from the scene of the crime,
says the DA.
As stated, the Black Sparrow City Ballistics Lab determined the weapon in question to have been a powder-based firearm,
possibly a large caliber revolver. Laymen will know this better as the celebrated six-shooter of untamed frontier days. Today, I have brought with me a similar model for the benefit of the jury's deliberation.
I sit up a little straighter. This is new. With an air of prestidigitation, Mr. District Attorney retrieves his attaché case from the prosecutor's table, opens it, and draws out a weapon, a giant, chrome-plated revolver. Distress ripples through the courtroom at the sight of the weapon, with its long, thick barrel and heavy-duty skeletal frame. It's almost a foot long from hammer to nose, and it takes 2 hands for the DA to hold it. His fingers are wrapped tightly around the carved wooden handle.
"A Grant Stillitz double-action Model 9, he says.
He flips open the swing-out cylinder for a view of the large, empty chambers within.
"Holds 6 rounds, and fires a .50 caliber bullet via smokeless powder. I've never seen one fired myself, but I'm told that when discharged in darkness, this weapon can turn night into day. A single blast can cause temporary hearing loss."
He sits the 6-shooter down on the table with a gut-shaking thud.
"A powder-based firearm is an uncommon choice of weapon," the DA says, massaging his wrist. "Less than 3% of violent crimes committed since the incorporation of the city of Jannix involved powder weapons. And because they are not well matched to the needs of military or law enforcement, consumer demand is low. Grant Stillitz is one of the few specialty manufacturers still making powder-based weaponry products. Those they sell go mostly to collectors and sports shooters."
I find myself barely listening. My eyes are instead locked on the giant chrome revolver on the table. All I can hear is what I imagine the blast of that gun must sound like. Thunder on earth, exploding in my head. Over and over, over and over, and over and over again. 6 shots.
"The bizarre choice of weapon calls into question the killer's motives," the DA is saying. "Some sort of calling card, maybe. Or a sick, twisted joke. Jack here is no stranger to firearms. On the night Maria Tarelli was murdered, Detective Tarelli was carrying standard issue Amber PD weaponry, a .38 caliber accelerated slug sidearm. He is certified in its use and has discharged it several times in the line of duty. As an infantryman in the war, Jack would have become quite familiar with the popular .30 caliber sandblaster carbine. He would have also been highly trained in the use of fully automatic particle beam assault rifles and other varieties of weapons with which soldiers of the day were expected to be proficient. In addition, investigation of the premises of Detective Tarelli revealed a small arsenal of personally owned firearms, from handguns to shotguns and 1 particle rifle. Jack claims these were all purchased legally for home defense and sport shooting. I will concede to the defense that no .50 caliber revolver was found to be in Jack Tarelli's possession, nor among his collection. Nor are there any records that Jack did, at any time, legally purchase a powder-based firearm of any kind. However, his collection tells us a lot about him."
The district attorney waves a disgusted hand at the table and continues.
"No petty criminal is carrying one of these things. A weapon like this is, arguably, only of interest to a gun enthusiast, a collector. And as for the defense's claim to the murder being a possible hit, somehow linked to local organized crime, first off, I ask you, to what end? And second, what is a low-life, scum-of-the-world hitman for the mob doing with a weapon like this? A valuable collector's item that is practically an antique."
The district attorney turns to lock eyes with me. Or at least it will appear that way to the jury. The truth is, even he can't look me in the eye for what he's doing to me. Instead, his gaze is firmly planted at the top of my head, where a little bit of hair yet remains. It'll be gone soon.
"This wasn't mob violence," he says. "It was an isolated incident committed by a paranoid and overworked individual who has spent so long on the front lines, here and abroad, that he's become desensitized to death. A husband who thought he could get away with murder by using an unregistered weapon from his personal collection because, as an officer of the law familiar with criminal investigations, he knew it would be practically untraceable. He did this thing, ladies and gentlemen. Jack Tarelli is Jack the Knife. He is the six-shooter killer.
12. Nathan Harland. Shot 6 times. I throw the scotch back and let it trickle down my throat. I savor the burn. I bathe in its numbing, healing aura. I sit alone in a corner booth of the watering hole not far from my apartment. Nobody bothers me as I work, scanning my datapad through the news articles that have been run since the murder of Nathan Harland. I've lost track of how many drinks. I shake my head, trying to clear the haze, trying to clear it of memories of the courtroom, the pictures, the six-shooter on the table, and the connections. The 6 shots that killed Nathan Harland have me playing connect the dots. And as for the possible link to the blue wreath, I try to take another drink, but my glass is empty. My hand is shaking. I bang my glass against the table. "No ice," I growl. The bartender's a skinny wisp of a thing, and he hurries to comply. Doesn't bother trying to get the empty glass from me, just fills up a fresh one. He knows me, knows I have a temper sometimes. Not 2 weeks ago, I left some upstart's teeth on the floor for getting too familiar. I should quit drinking. Maria Tarelli. Just one unsolved case in a city full of them. A case that's over a decade old now and should just be let go. But I haven't let it go. I feel the muscles tightening beneath my sleeves. A hairline fracture cracks in the empty glass in my hand. Damn right I haven't. The wispy bartender brings my drink, sits it on the table, and leaves quietly. I flip my datapad to the next article. Nathan Harland, memorial services announced. Deceased father, billionaire Rutherford Harland, to receive guests in the Amber City's Botanical Gardens in his first public appearance in almost 20 years. I've read this all already, and thus far have been rewarded no great insight. But rereading the same information in slightly different wording has at least helped me to digest and familiarize myself with the family history of the Harlands. The legendary, self-made billionaire Rutherford, the quiet, number-crunching son Nathan, and the spotlight-loving philanthropist daughter, Yvonne Harland Reed. Amber City detectives declined to provide details regarding the cause of death, but one officer commented, "The pallets in that factory looked like they had not been moved in years. It would have been a long time before anyone found the body if we hadn't been directed to it by an anonymous tip." I stop. I reread the final paragraph twice more, just to be sure of what I'm seeing. I briefly consider trying to contact Detective Albright right here and now, but decide against it, sauced as I am. Better to head home, sleep it off for a few hours, than get hold of him. I shouldn't have come here in the first place, but Caesar's unsolicited reminder of the past rattled me up something good. I shut my datapad off and put it away. I finish my drink and drop a crumpled wad of bills on the table. I stand, and the world goes lopsided. I brace myself against the table, double clutch, and start again, this time more carefully. I tip my hat to the bartender and cross the gently swirling room, past patrons who pay me no mind. My drunkard's gait is practiced, hearty, and capable. I notice, just a little too late, the occupants of the table beside the door. 4 big, silent men in trench coats, each of them staring at me so hard you'd think I was a naked woman walking on her hands. I exit through the front door as casually as possible. As soon as the door swings shut behind me, I duck low and slip left. It's raining again, damn it. The tilting world plays tricks on my footing, and I nearly fall twice as I race through the rain toward the corner of the alley that leads home. I draw the .44 cal axe-lug pistol from my chest holster as I run. Should have been paying closer attention, I scold myself. Scratch that. Should have just had a water.
I practically crawl the last bit of the way, and I've just made it around the corner when I hear the bar door swing open violently and crack on its hinges against the outside wall. I crouch behind a garbage can for cover. The world is rotating around me. I shake my head, trying to put it right, but no dice. I'm 3 sheets to the wind, and in no condition to hold my own against anybody, let alone not 4 men who presumably are in the business of holding their own. Not in a fair fight, anyway. I pull the flash grenade from my jacket pocket, remove the pin, and let it cook. I hear the hurried smacking of shoes against puddles coming my way. The countdown runs in my head. 5, 4, 3, 2. I throw my weight into the garbage can. It falls over and spills across the street. The flash grenade blends in with the rest of the trash. I turn my back and hear the electric pop whine as the grenade discharges. For a split second, the alley lights up bright as the sun. I hear a chorus of surprised screams. Still ducked low, I swing around the corner to take inventory of my pursuers. Of the big, trench-coated men, all 4 are holding pistols. 3 are on their knees, stunned and temporarily blinded by the flash. But the 4th, who either anticipated the attack or is just lucky enough to have avoided direct eye contact, is still standing. His face lights up nastily as he sees me. He swings his pistol and fires. There's an eruption of brick and mortar as the accelerated slug blows a hole the size of a champagne cork in the wall beside me, erasing any doubt of what these men are here to do to me. Whatever happens next, remember, they had it coming. I squeeze the trigger and pop him 3 times in the chest, fast. The zip-whirring reports of my axe-lug rounds sound like hummingbirds. He goes down. I advance, nearly fall over, and crack the nearest of the stunned killers with the snout of my pistol, just above the bridge of his nose. His eyes roll back, and he sprawls over, unconscious. One of the remaining men aims toward the sound of my footfalls and fires blindly in my direction. I hear the strange, sucking sound of the bullet's trajectory as it whizzes by, inches from my earlobe. I react out of pure reflex. It's less of a dive for cover than a semi-controlled, drunken fall as I hit the ground, taking cover behind the other remaining thug. I hear 2 more reports, followed by painful shouts as thug number 1 caps thug number 2 in his blind firing. The poor Sepp tries to tell his buddy to stop, just before he's hammered twice in the chest and goes down. It's just sad. No guy wants his death to be funny. I roll and see the blind firing thug taking aim again at the sounds of my movement. Lying sideways on the ground, I'm holding my pistol with both hands, praying for dear life that despite the way the world spins around me, my aim is true. I squeeze the trigger. Zip! The thug's head jerks backward. He looks angry at his own rotten luck as he turns slightly, fires once into the air, and smacks dead against the street. I waste no time. Scrambling through puddles, I hurry to remove the gun from the hand of the thug I knocked cold. I pat him down for additional weapons. The sound of footsteps. I wheel around, raising my pistol, at the bartender aiming a shotgun at me. I don't drop my gun, but I do put my hands up. The bartender takes the hint and lowers the shotgun. "You hurt?" he asks. "Call the police," I pant. "Tell them to send Detective Albright. Mention the Nathan Harland case." He turns to hustle back into the bar. I bind the hands of the unconscious thug behind his back using my necktie. The other 3 are dead. I try not to bloody my hands as I check their pockets. Nothing but a few personal items. No ID, of course. It takes my body a while to believe the danger's past. I breathe a shaky sigh of relief and sit down, leaning against the wall, feeling the rainwater soak through my trousers. The wail of the approaching sirens drifts down through the rooftops. Got to quit drinking, I say to no one. 13. I run a hand over my bald head. In all the excitement, I don't know where my hat went. The alley is bathed in the on and off and on again flashing of reds and blues.
The lone survivor among my attackers is currently being loaded into the back of an ambulance. He gives me one last deadly look before the cops shut the door behind him. In front of me, Jean-Luc Albright is standing there, turning my pistol back and forth in his hand to examine it. "Your mother ever tell you not to play with guns?" I say.
"You got a permit for this?"
he asks. "In my other suit." "And this," says Jean-Luc, using his datapad stylus to hold up the clamshell-like remnants of the discharged flash grenade. "Oh, they don't make permits for that," I say. Albright doesn't laugh. His little partner, Wilmer O'Hara, standing beside him, looks even less amused. "He reeks," O'Hara says to Albright. "You're no Petunia yourself, Wilmer," I say.
"I mean, you smell like you're drunk," Wilmer says. "Give me one reason why we shouldn't arrest you right now."
"I'm only allowed one?"
"Now listen, Jack,"
Albright growls. "No, you listen," I growl back, standing to full height. Both of them flinch. They started the trouble. I finished it. I just took 4 killers off the streets. Off your streets. I let out a disgusted breath. And you want to arrest me? Should be pinning a medal on me.
"So you confessed to killing them?"
Wilmer says. I was attacked without provocation. I responded out of fear for my own safety and the safety of civilians around me, and deadly force became necessary. This one actually draws a smile from Jean-Luc. I've just recited, nearly verbatim, the civilians' right to self-defense as defined in the Democratic Trade Coalition's interplanetary code of law. Behind us, the ambulance with its lone survivor lifts from the ground and flies away with lights bobbing back and forth lazily. Albright watches it go, then tosses the flash grenade shell in a rainbow arc directly into the open lid of a nearby dumpster. "You get anything out of the guy?" he asks. I shrug. "Nothing good. We exchanged words when he came to, but he didn't feel like chatting." O'Hara speaks up.
"What does this have to do with the Harlan case?"
"What do you mean?" I say.
"The guy on the phone said—"
"Did he?" I say. O'Hara's cheeks go red. I shouldn't have done that. Should have at least let him finish his sentence, but I'm still pretty sauced, and it's got my tongue looser than it should be. O'Hara starts to say something, but Albright touches his shoulder and gestures toward the bodies in the street. He takes the hint and trudges off. Albright turns back to face me. He lights a cigarette, scratches his 5 o'clock shadow.
"I'd lecture you about disrupting police investigations, but I guess you already got a pretty good idea what I'd have to say, Detective Tarelli."
"You read my file, huh?"
"I knew I heard the name before, so I looked into it. I remember your trial. I was pretty green at the time, working a beat down in Titan City. For what it's worth, I thought you got a raw deal. A lot of us did."
He pauses here. I don't say anything.
"It's bad what happened to this town," says Albright. "These days, you can't tell what side anyone's on."
I stare him down. Yeah, never can tell. Albright sighs out a cloud of smoke, hands me my gun. "If you happen to see my hat," I start to tell him.
"Don't push it," he snaps. "You got us down here. Might as well tell me what you want."
"I want to know the condition of the body of Nathan Harland."
He's generally befuddled for a second. "You saw the photos."
"I mean the condition on arrival, before you moved the pallets." I watched the befuddlement morph into understanding, then a sort of appraisal.
"How'd you know about that?"
"A reporter for the Daily printed something one of your boys said. Something about the body never being found if not for the call, because the pallets looked like they hadn't been moved in years. Thing is, I was there. Not only were there no pallets near the body, but I didn't notice any sort of discoloration on the floor. If there had been pallets sitting there in the same place for years, you'd be able to tell. So something was moved. But it didn't look like your boys moved anything to me. Albright hesitates, then makes up his mind.
Well, they did. But you're right.
Come again? He sighs.
The caller gave us an address and said we'd find Nathan Harland in the abandoned factory, buried under some equipment. When we got there, we found a bunch of rusty old pallets, big metal ones, stacked up right in the middle of the factory floor.
So you move the pallets, and you find the body. Right where the caller said it would be?
Right. But it took some work. Harland had been entombed under the things. And like you said, no discoloration on the floor when we moved them. They'd been piled up. Recently.
Somebody was trying to hide the body, I say. Kind of ruins my theory about the tipster being the killer. Why go through all that trouble to hide it if you're just gonna call the cops? O'Hara is waving for Albright to come over. He's in the middle of a call on his datapad, maybe something related to the case. Albright unceremoniously flicks the cigarette butt at the dead bodies behind him.
You'll be called in for questioning about this, Tarelli,
he says. That's fine, I say. Just not tonight. I have work to do.
You mean you don't like to have your work interrupted?
Says Albright. I grin. Message received. Albright nods a grim-faced goodbye and heads over to join O'Hara, who relays some information to him that I wish I could hear. Then they walk to their cruiser and get in. An unexpected feeling creeps up and blindsides me. Envy. A homesick sort of feeling for my old job, for the life that's so far behind me. The cruiser hovers off the ground and starts to ascend, but then it lowers back down again. The door opens. Albright leans out.
Tarelli,
he shouts over the whine of anti-gravity engines.
You were right. About 45-degree angles.
He shuts the door again. The hovercar lifts, turns, and takes off into the night sky at terrific speed. Officers are cleaning things up and taking photos amid flashing cruiser lights, but nobody seems bothered as I search the garbage strewn across the street. I manage to find my hat. Somebody's stepped on it, though, smashing it all out of shape, so I leave it there. I circle around the bar, heading not for home but the opposite direction. My close brush with death has me jumping at shadows, and the words I exchanged with my attacker when he woke up, words I chose not to disclose to Albright, have me even more on edge. Every dark alley hides a killer, and every sound is a hitman tailing me. 20 minutes later, satisfied I'm not being followed and sick of walking in wet pants, I cut back along the side streets for home. 14. Once upon a time, I could take a punch and move on. Nowadays, I can still take a punch all right. It's the moving on that's tough. Pain isn't just pain anymore. My nerves fire differently. It's like they get stuck in a loop. Don't know when to stop. But far worse, I simply can't recover the way I used to. It's not about toughness or willpower, or even taking the right drugs. My body's susceptible to injury no matter what I do. And when I do get hurt, it takes a long time to heal. One careless mistake, one wrong step, one little fall can change everything, which is a problem in this line of work, where a limp or a twisted ankle could mean the difference between getting home for dinner and getting zipped up in a body bag. I barely broke a sweat in that shootout outside the bar, yet my knees feel like they've been lubricated with acid. I lock the door behind me and trudge into my apartment, shedding my wet clothes. I grab a tin of painkiller salve and sit down on the bed. I apply a glob to my knees and start massaging it in. The salve has a distinct aroma that I associate with my father. I lay back on the bed, gritting my teeth. The pain is only getting worse. It'll come back down in a minute or two, but for now, I'm a man who wants to fight, trapped in a body that can't. It's a grim reminder that I can work out all I like, get strong, stay fit, take all the right supplements, but it doesn't change the places inside me worn down from long years of hard use. I hate feeling this way. Old, vulnerable, brittle. I wasn't always so frail. Once during the war, I had a gunshot wound go untreated for 6 hours without getting laid up. We'd taken a desert command post by night, and in the chaos, I somehow managed to take a slug to the hip, which became something of a problem when an enemy convoy, returning from patrol, peaked the horizon. They caught wind of trouble right away and opened fire on us. Our medic, as luck would have it, was the first to go, taken out by a rocket along with all his supplies. Our only chance was to hunker down in the Virov's own trenches and hope they didn't charge. So there we were, dead of night, pinned down, outnumbered at least 20-1. The skies were too rough for assault ships or troop shuttles, so no reinforcements. I called in an orbital strike, but these things take time. Satellite targeting, relay to gunships in orbit that then need to calibrate for atmospheric conditions, then reposition themselves along the correct orbital path and wait for a clear shot. For 5 hours, we were pinned down under heavy fire, exchanging shots with the convoy, trying to hold them back. Gray sand rained down on us in the trenches from bullets peppering above us. Gunfire killed some of our guys, mortars took others. This one guy, Clancy, his name was, or Chancey or Cheney or something, a sharpshooter, he was a machine, killed at least 4 dozen Virovs that night. Just kept shooting and reloading. Finally, he says he's out of ammo but remembers a weapons cache 50 yards rear. Clancy, I tell him, or Chancey or Cheney or whatever. Get down and stay down. Strike's incoming. Till then, you sit tight. No disrespect, Sarge, he says, but nothing doing. We either keep shooting or we sit and we wait to die. You stay in this trench, soldier, I shouted him. That's an order. But he doesn't listen. He jumps up and takes off for the cache. The guy made it about 3 steps before I heard the pop-pop-pop of slugs, punching holes through his body armor. In through his back and out through the front. He probably never even knew he was shot. It can't be more than a couple minutes after Clancy's shot down that my man on the horn gives me the word. Strike's incoming. Take cover. Take cover. Right. I ask him what he thinks we've been doing for the past 5 hours, and he thankfully pretends not to hear me. Somewhere in space high above the surface of Antioch, gunship cannons open fire, tearing clean through the atmosphere. I'll never forget the sound. An orbital barrage, man-made, cobalt blue lightning strikes, supercharged beyond imagining, hitting the planet's surface like meteors, disintegrating anything in direct contact, detonating along the periphery, burning half-mile-wide craters into the desert, turning sand to glass. Even after the Virov convoy has been erased from existence, it's still another hour before we can get a medic in to patch up my hip. Clancy's dead, along with half my unit, and I don't even take bed rest. I go out on patrol as scheduled the next day. I dip my hand back into the salve and apply a generous portion of the analgesic to my right elbow, tender from hitting the street in my dive for cover. Funny that I'd be thinking of Clancy on a night like tonight, 20-odd years since my last tour on Antioch. I used to think it was bravery that made him run for the cache that day. I've met a lot of guys like him over the years. Guys who never back down, never falter, never surrender. Guys who fight on, no matter what, without fear. Until they run out of bullets. As long as Clancy kept firing, he was master of his destiny. What would have saved his life that day was doing the one thing he couldn't do. Sitting and waiting, and giving up control. War is a series of charges and retreats. Those who never charge never win. But those who never retreat once in a while don't live long enough to win either. Sometimes You've got to know when to limp home and lick your wounds. Lying on my bed, looking at the ceiling, I breathe deeply. The pain is pulling back a bit, and I'm pretty much sobered up. Now I'm just tired. Just going to rest my eyes. Just for a minute.